What differentiates active listening from disciplined listening? There are a lot of similarities. And for 1 second, I will not stand up and talk bad about active listening and say don't do it. All those things they teach about active listening are very important. Most of active listening is designed, created, and coached to make sure that the people we're talking to feel like we're listening to them. So maintain good eye contact and summarize what you hear, and please don't mirror but match their posture. A lot of times when we mirror it, it comes off as intentional and insincere and can hurt the relationship. But all those things, smile and nod, all those things that active listening teach, please do. I'm sure you can all do a really good job making sure somebody feels like you're listening to them while you're planning everything you have to do this weekend with your family. And that's where the problem lies. Disciplined listening is not making sure the people you're talking to feel like you're listening. Of course, those components are there. They're necessary. Disciplined listening really falls into a handful of steps that start before the conversation ever takes place and continues after the conversation is completed. First and foremost, in order to be executing a disciplined listening approach, we have to understand before we go into any conversation, what is the potential value of this conversation? Short-term, long-term. Based on how I enter into this conversation, what is the potential value that I can get from it? Once we have that outlined, now we can stop and ask ourselves, okay, what strategic approach do I need to take going into this conversation that will give me the best opportunity to achieve as much of that value as possible and not create any unnecessary resistance along the way? So we understand the value, we set up the strategy or the game plan, and now we go into the interaction. And when we're having the conversation, it is now critical that we are taking in the totality of our observations. Everything we see, everything we hear, the nuances within the context of the situation, and relating it back to our strategy. A lot of times when people teach evaluating verbal and nonverbal communication, they teach it like a shortcut. If we look at that like a shortcut, we're setting ourselves up for trouble. The observations are relatively useless unless we have a strategic framework to relate them back to. The goal of these observations is to integrate new strategic information, strategic intelligence that we didn't have prior, which then allows us to adapt our approach on the fly, which then leads to creating the commitment we were looking for and finally following up after the conversation. Active listening is great. Please do it. If you want somebody to believe that you truly listen to them, there is one thing you have to do. What is it? Listen. Yes. And then, I give you a hint, it doesn't happen during the conversation. You have to follow up. We can summarize and we can repeat and we can say I listen and we can give them all the nonverbals that say we're listening. But if we do not follow up after the conversation, what tangible proof do they have that we listened? We tiptoed around political lines earlier, which you can't offend. If you need a gold medal if you offend me, so don't. Yeah. By tiptoe, you kind of.
Goes right in there.
Now I'm going to tiptoe around some religious lines without turning this into a religious conversation. Let me ask you this. What is the difference between faith and trust?
Trust, you believe in someone. Faith, you believe in something higher.
Okay, that's leaning towards the religious piece. When you believe in someone, typically what causes you to believe in someone?
Their actions.
Yes. That is the key differentiator between trust and faith. We trust people in things that are tangible, that we have experience with, that we can touch, that we can see, that we can feel, that we know is there. We tend to have faith in things that we believe, but we don't necessarily have that tangible experience with. If you want someone to trust you, give them tangible experience. If you want someone to have faith in you, say, don't worry, I've got this. Now, if you ask them to have faith in you a few times and you come through, that will certainly turn to trust. That brings us back to following up. Following up gives people the tangible evidence, the tangible experience that we did indeed listen, and that's why it's so important. A big part of my life involves being a geek. There was a research study done nationwide back in 1987. I believe it's still valuable, where they looked at a series of inmates in federal prison, convicted felons, and they asked all of them, do you believe you received a fair trial or not? If the answer is yes or no, why? The number one reason that caused convicted felons to feel like they received a fair trial had nothing to do with the judge, the jury, the charges, what prison they were sent to, the length of their sentence. It had everything to do with the amount of time their defense attorney spent with them. The more time their defense attorney spent with them, regardless of the final outcome, they felt like they received a fair trial. The less time their attorney spent with them, regardless of the outcome, they felt like they did not receive a fair trial. If we want someone to trust us, we have to give them a tangible reason to do so.